The year is 1938. Europe is tense. Hitler is making moves. France and Britain have obligations to defend Belgium, not to mention their own citizens living there. But they're not ready for war. Not yet, anyway. And so they turn to a man whose family name has become synonymous with leadership during times of crisis, Winston Churchill, the world they were born into. Let's go back to the beginning. Winston Leonard Spencer Churchill was born on November 30th, 1874, at Blenheim Palace in Oxfordshire, England. Talk about being born into wealth. His father, Lord Randolph Churchill, was a prominent politician, though one who'd recently been kicked out of the Conservative Party for being an independent thinker. His mother, Lady Randolph, came from the US and was a socialite and a bit of an actress. Think of her like a cross between Jackie Kennedy and Martha Stewart. Now, she wanted her son to be groomed for politics, but Winston had other ideas. He preferred smoking cigars, painting, hunting crocodiles in the jungle, driving his motor car like a maniac, and hanging out with his military idol, his grandfather, Duke of Marlborough, who'd led British troops to victory against the French and Spanish in the Battle of Malplaquet in 1709. No pressure, Winston. Early struggles. Winston was educated at prestigious boarding schools, Harrow and Eton, where he excelled at athletics and developed his leadership skills. But when it came time for university, he decided to skip over Cambridge or Oxford and instead went to Sandhurst, the Royal Military Academy, where he trained to become an army officer. Then in 1895, he joined the 4th Hussars, a cavalry regiment of the British Army, and was sent to India with them. There, he honed his skills as a soldier and developed a deep appreciation for British colonialism. It was around this time that he also began to develop his political views. Although he'd always considered himself a conservative, he became increasingly disillusioned with the Tories, whom he felt were out of touch with the needs of the average Englishman. So, in 1900, he decided to run as an independent Liberal candidate for the House of Commons. However, he lost the election. So then he tried again in 1906, running as a Conservative. This time, he won. At age 31, he was now a member of Parliament and soon would be given his first taste of government, serving as a junior Lord of the Admiralty. But he didn't stay there long. In 1910, he resigned after falling out with the First Lord of the Admiralty. Then in 1911, he accepted a position as a military attaché in France, which he held until the outbreak of war in 1914. When war broke out, Churchill returned to Britain and once again entered politics, becoming the First Lord of the Admiralty. Finally, his dream job. But it was not all he hoped it would be. In 1915, 2 of the ships that he had approved the construction of were nearly sunk by German U-boats, one of which, the HMS Audacious, was sunk. Churchill blamed himself and suffered a nervous breakdown. He then took a leave of absence from his post and was appointed as the Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, basically a figurehead position. But his time away from the Admiralty was short-lived. When the Gallipoli campaign failed, Churchill resigned from his new post and was heavily criticized by the press. But he wasn't done with public life just yet. During the last 3 years of World War I, he served on the Western Front, fighting in France and Belgium. In 1919, he was knighted for his service. Then in 1920, he was elected as the Conservative Member of Parliament for Epping. Throughout the next 2 decades, he held various positions in government, including Chancellor of the Exchequer and Home Secretary, but never quite got back to his old role at the Admiralty. In 1924, he left politics entirely, becoming the British representative to the League of Nations. He remained there until 1929, when he was called back to Parliament to serve as the Chancellor of the Exchequer once more. Turning point. The threat of war with Germany had been looming in Europe for years, and in 1938 it seemed that it might actually be happening. France and Britain had obligations to defend Belgium and its people, but the British in particular were unprepared for war. Their army was small and their air force even smaller. Plus, many people, including the king, thought that war was avoidable. But Churchill disagreed. He warned that if Britain allowed Hitler to take over Czechoslovakia, then he would take over Poland next, and then there would be no choice but to go to war. Most people, including the king and Neville Chamberlain, the prime minister, ignored him. Chamberlain had already met with Hitler and decided that giving up the Sudetenland was worth the cost in order to avoid war. In September, he announced that Britain would not fight to defend Czechoslovakia. Furious, Churchill resigned from the opposition and took a seat on the back benches. But within weeks, his prediction had come true. Germany had invaded Poland and Britain, and France were forced to declare war on Germany. Chamberlain appointed Churchill as the First Lord of the Admiralty once more. And just like before, he quickly fell out with the other leaders, particularly Anthony Eden, the Foreign Secretary. So in May 1940, he resigned, only to be asked by King George VI to form a new government. This was the turning point of Churchill's career. With his experience in the Admiralty and the military, coupled with his knowledge of Hitler and Nazi Germany, he was the right man for the job. He wasted no time in getting down to business, assembling a new government, issuing a defiance speech in Parliament, and meeting with the French president to discuss strategy. Then, of course, there was that famous speech to the House of Commons. "We shall fight on the beaches. We shall fight on the landing grounds. We shall fight in the fields and in the streets. We shall fight in the hills. We shall never surrender." That's what Churchill told the members of Parliament and the people of Britain on June 4, 1940, just 4 days after the British Expeditionary Force had been forced to retreat from the beaches of Dunkirk. Those words, along with his other speeches and writings, helped rally the British people during their darkest hour and instilled in them the belief that they would eventually prevail. Under Churchill's leadership, Britain was able to resist the German war machine, winning key battles in the air, on the ground, and at sea. With the help of their allies, the British people were able to liberate France and much of Western Europe and eventually defeat Nazi Germany. For his leadership during this time, Churchill was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature in 1953, and in 1965, he became the first person to be awarded the International Prize for Peace, Legacy, and Death. After World War II, Churchill's health began to decline. He suffered a stroke in 1953 and a second one in 1956, which forced him to resign as Prime Minister. On January 24, 1965, he died of a cerebral hemorrhage while painting in his study at his home in London. He was buried next to his wife, Clementine, and his daughter, Mary, who died in 1942 in the churchyard of St. Martin's Church in Blaydon, Oxfordshire. A state funeral with full military honors was held in London, and he was mourned by people all over the world. Today, Churchill is remembered as one of the greatest leaders of the 20th century. He's credited with helping to save Britain and Europe from Nazi Germany, and with inspiring people all over the world to stand up for what they believe in, no matter how difficult the odds. In fact, many people consider him to be the greatest Englishman who ever lived. Whether you agree with that assessment or not, there's no denying that Winston Churchill was an extraordinary man who accomplished extraordinary things. Thanks for watching.